handle the truth.
The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman, Seattle. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder, Seattle.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress, Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark, Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds AGPT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Denise Simon Experience. Heard worldwide on Mojo 50. We are here in Washington, D.C. at the Federation for American Immigration Reform. Hold their feet to the fire. Radio Row, and I have in front of us a real star. You have seen him certainly on Fox. You have mostly probably seen him give some congressional testimony behind, I would say, some really contentious committees, and that is Tom Homan. Tom is retired from ICE. He is a Fox News contributor, certainly, and has given some remarkable testimony. And I think you're actually going to do that again in the next 24 hours. Welcome, Mr. Tom Homan.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, let's talk about the duties of the personnel that are assigned to ICE detention facilities. How much of those duties have they changed?
Well, the ICE detention, let me say this. First of all, the ICE detention facilities, they're not concentration camps. ICE has the highest detention standards in the industry. Our detention standards are higher than any local, state, or federal facility in this country. We treat these illegal aliens better than U.S. citizens are being treated in county jails or state or federal facilities. So we're busy. I mean, they're busy. They're up to 55,000 in custody now, the most they've ever had. And but they're doing a good job. Despite all the attacks about being Nazis, about running concentration camps, the men and women still come to work and do their job. They still defend this nation. What people need to understand, the people in ICE facilities, first of all, 89% of everybody ICE arrests for immigration issues have a criminal history, have a criminal conviction, or pending criminal charges. So a lot of these people in detention facilities need to be there because they're a public safety threat. And also, if a Congress who wants to shut down immigration detention, let me give them a little factoid, which they don't seem to want to accept. 72% of everybody in ICE custody are congressionally mandated to be there. They have passed laws that once you get to a certain level of criminality, or if you're in an expedited removal case, you're mandatorily required to be detained. So you got some members of Congress saying we need to shut down immigration detention. Well, you do your homework because you require 7 out of 10 to be there. That's your call. And ICE couldn't release them if they wanted to. So it's a ridiculous argument they make. It's another piece of false narrative that I'll push back against.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I know that you like to fight, and we need you to fight the fight. So the people that are assigned, the people that are on the government payroll that are assigned to the ICE facilities, their duties are very different today than they were 5 years ago, are they not?
Well, a lot of the duties are still the same. The difference is now they're being attacked for what they do. And we had a detention facilities in Washington State that was attacked. Someone tried to burn it down with about 100 employees inside, but about 1,300 immigrants who are being held to see a judge. So we had an ICE facility in San Antonio that was shot at. We had a contract guard that was accosted, and there was a big issue at one of the facilities that, they said, well, he ran somebody over. The man feared for his safety. I mean, these protesters are out of control. So the men and women that work in these facilities not only worry about the criminals inside of facilities and their own health while they're working inside of facilities, now they got to worry about who's out front of their house, who's following the work, who's protesting outside, who's trying to burn down the facility, who's trying to shoot the facilities. So the men and women in these facilities are a lot different place than they were several years ago. Absolutely.
We have a volume issue. Are we contracting to have more facilities, or is it just about beds? How does that necessarily work? Is it a spike in a valley kind of on the traffic volume?
I think the president made it clear that we're not doing catch and release anymore. So as the volume goes up, more beds are needed. And ICE, at least when I was there, and I'm sure it's the same, they have beds on standby. They know they can buy more beds when they need them if Congress funds them. So they could put another 10,000 beds on if they needed to, because they know where they're going. But we got a lot of county sheriffs throughout the country who would love to do ICE business. But a lot of those sheriffs also don't want to live up to our detention standards, because they don't want to give illegal aliens higher detention standards than they have for U.S. citizens in that jail. So it's a demand issue. Now that numbers are going down a little bit, there's less demand. But Congress has never funded ICE at the appropriate level. They had a fit this past year that the secretary moved money from within the department to buy more ICE beds. It's called reprogramming. But they know under 8 years on the Obama administration, we reprogrammed 6 of the 8 years. 6 of the 8. So reprogramming is something that happens almost every year. This administration is doing nothing different, except this year was a travesty. Under the Obama administration, it was just course of doing business.
Well, I heard the other day, interestingly enough, that Obama repurposed major monies for the Ebola outbreak, and nobody seems to remember that little thing. And that paralyzed the country for what, a month and a half?
Well, I think the more important thing, if I'm right, I think President Obama declared a national emergency on that.
Yes, he did.
So that affected.
That's how you could repurpose the money.
That affected a few hundred people. President Trump gets in trouble for declaring a national emergency. That affects thousands. So I think if the Ebola was a national crisis, a national emergency, I certainly think the southern border is, considering what's going on down there.
Paralyzed what? The hospital in Houston or Dallas? I think it was Houston. TV cameras were there. The whole thing was going on.
Well, another thing, now we're talking about ICE detention. Let's talk about it real quick. In ICE detention, many times we provide these immigrants the first physician they've ever seen in their life. In the family residential centers, many times we provide the first vaccines these children have ever had. We have cases of chickenpox, measles, TB that we screen in our facilities so they won't be released in the general public. So when these kids go to elementary school, they're not going there with lice, chickenpox, measles, or TB. And ICE detention is important because just a couple of years ago when I was director, we had one case, a man had TB. It was a strain of TB that couldn't be treated by medicine. There was no medicine developed at the time to treat this specific strain of TB. We worked with the Texas Department of CDC, was able to come up with something after months. But just think, if this guy was not been held in detention, we wouldn't have caught this TB case. What would have happened to the American public? So a lot of people don't want to talk about that, but ICE detention also catches many public health issues before they hit the public.
And especially at the school level,
Yeah, when I was ICE director, we had facilities completely shut down over chickenpox and measles. Again, we all know chickenpox and measles. It's easy to get if you haven't been vaccinated. So again, we were able to take care of those issues before they were released into the general public.
There was a lot of talk about having detention facilities at some of the military bases. Where did that go? What happened there?
Well, I think that's an option that's available.
Still.
Yeah, because it's federal land, right? So you can't. So you defeat a lot of the red tape from the local government or the state. There's a lot less red tape because it's government-owned land. So there's a lot less requirements to stand something up quickly. It's like our first family detention center that we built in FY15. We built on Border Patrol in a Border Patrol facility in Artesia, New Mexico. It's just easier to do, less requirements, less red tape. For the military bases, DOD's been a great partner, DHS. DOD's been on the border helping, restore infrastructure and build barriers, helping with, designing, engineering the wall. And they're there to stand by. If we need their buildings and their land to do more, they stand by ready to help.
How many outside private companies are contracted to be ICE detention facilities?
I would say, I think 75% of our detained population are in a facility that's contracted by ICE. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, these contract facilities do it better than the government. The most expensive beds in ICE portfolio are beds that ICE owns and operates. The federal government don't do it very well. So these contractors, these companies, these large detention companies, they on the left calls them for-profit prisons. Well, so most businesses in the country are doing business because they want profit. But again, they've established the highest detention standards in the industry. They know what they're doing. They've operated these things for decades. They're very good at what they do. So without our contractors, we couldn't succeed. I mean, we're cops. When I was the ICE director, we got whether it's Deloitte, whether it's Hewlett Packard, whether it's all, I can go on about all the different contractors we do business with. We couldn't do our job without them. I mean, we got a lot of smart contractors, young kids that come in, no IT, no computers, and build systems. We contract with a lot of different companies, and we couldn't succeed without them. Again, because we're cops. We can't build an IT system. We can't build a detention facility. And these folks help us. They help us to succeed. And people want to vilify them now and protest what companies work with ICE. So let's make certain clear. They're helping ICE arrest child predators. Thousands of them every year. They're helping ICE rescue women from sex trafficking. They're helping ICE, and I went over all these numbers. They're helping ICE do that job. So if you don't like ICE because of family separations, study the issue. ICE didn't separate any families. That was Border Patrol. Not bad. Border Patrol did what they had to do. It wasn't Border Patrol. ICE doesn't put anybody in cages. And second of all, the cages are built in the Obama administration. Third, ICE doesn't have a deportation machine because last year they removed 237,000, and FY9 on President Obama removed 409,000. Where were all the haters then? When they removed twice as many people. So do your homework, study the issue, and I think you're going to realize ICE isn't the big bad wolf you think they are.
We keep hearing about how ICE has these detainers on these people in sanctuary cities, and the sanctuary cities just let them go, and then ICE has got to go out into the community, and they got to go confront something, and then you could end up with some kind of a pretty hostile confrontation trying to re-arrest somebody because the sanctuary cities let them go. So let's talk about the sanctuary city part of this for a second, if we can, because we have war zones. We had Iraq, we've got Libya, we have got Syria, and we talk about safe zones or those that the governments are going to step in and protect. Nobody has talked about safe zones so these people don't have to make the trip out of Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador. How come that's never been part of the discussion, do you think?
Well, one thing that's part of the discussion on border security is prosperity. The department's working very close with Central American governments, along with the Chamber of Commerce, and about prosperity in Central America. So before I retired, I went to a conference in Miami where leadership from Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras were there, along with leadership from Mexico. And one day, the conference we spent on security issues. How do we communicate law enforcement issues? How do we communicate with terrorism issues? How do we secure the borders? How do we protect criminals from, playing the system? The second day of the conference was about prosperity. We had large businesses there and large banks about developing opportunities in Central America, more opportunity for people to make a living so they don't have to leave. That's something no one wants to talk about, but it's happening. The Trump administration is actually trying to help these Central American companies to prosper, so they have no need to leave. They have no need to depart the country. But a lot of these people are coming for coverage for economic reasons. IOM, the Division of the United Nations, did a study that 78% of these people come, they're not asylum, they're economic refugees. So if we can build a prosperous economy in their homeland, maybe less will come. But still, you're going to have those that come for the free medical care, finest in the world. They're going to come to reunite with family members who are already here. I think they're always going to be a desire to come here.
Well, and the reason I bring this up is I want you to drive this point home. I mean, not only do we talk about these safe zones or, these sanctuary locations so these people don't have to necessarily leave, but we call them economic empowerment zones kind of thing. Tom, is it make more sense to have detention centers, if you will, that are funded by their local governments that we help in El Salvador? You see does that make sense?
No, I think,
in other words, it almost has if they've got to leave, then you don't have to go from Guatemala to El Salvador, from your little town to a safe zone right there. Does that make sense?
We help the Central American countries doing exactly that. That's why this administration has Guatemala stepped up. They're going to start taking asylum applications from people south of them. You got Mexico, who's given thousands of Central Americans asylum. They're offering asylum. For a country of Mexico, it's easier for them to deport somebody to Central America than it is for the United States. So we certainly give a lot of aid to these countries, and they need to put it to good use. Because of the president, Mexico's doing more than they've ever done. And it's actually a shame he had a threat in tariffs, which was a great idea because he made them come to the table. But Mexico has immigration laws and their own laws that they ignored. It's against the law in Mexico to traffic in women and children. But they turned a blind eye to it for years. The criminal cartels are running the northern border, and they know that. They failed to dismantle these organizations. So dealing with the immigration issue before it gets here, playing the away game rather than the home game is always smarter, it's always cheaper, it's always more humane. Because the cartels sell this idea is once you get foot in the United States, they're never going to make you leave. And some of these people sell their lives away. They sell everything they own. They pay $1,000 to get here under a false promise that they're going to get a visa, they get to stay, and 90% lose their case. So it's more humane if we can take this action further south.
It's a part that's not driven home. I mean, the Trump administration is doing some remarkable stuff here, and that whole thing about keeping them there and fixing the problem there instead of here makes more sense. And
not only does it make sense, it's following the letter of the law. The asylum. Look, asylum is about escaping fear and persecution from your home government because of race, religion, political affiliation, participation in a certain social group. So if you're really escaping fear and persecution from Honduras, once you leave Honduras and get into Guatemala or Mexico, guess what? You've escaped your oppression from your government. So it's the right thing to do is claim asylum in the first safe country to come to. But again, they're not really escaping fear and persecution. It's about getting to the United States. That's why you see the caravans. You see them carrying the Honduran flag or the Guatemala flag. In my lifetime, I've never seen anybody carry the flag of their oppressor. Their supposed oppressor. They're doing it. This isn't about escaping fear and persecution. It's about getting to the United States to get a job or to reunite with family members been here illegally for years.
It would seem to me if they want to come here for education or they want to come here for health care, I get it. They want to come for it. It would seem to me that it's a whole lot cheaper and employ the people down there to give them the, in USAID or our foreign aid or through our agriculture department or HHS. I mean, every one of our federal agencies does business outside the United States, correct?
Absolutely.
So,
and I think the United States gives a lot of help through a lot of various agencies to try to help these countries succeed. And that work has not stopped under this president.
Mr. Tom Homan, ICE has something called Most Wanted. I'm trying to think what it was there's some remarkable people that have to be arrested and have to be put in prison or jail someplace. And some of these people are some pretty nasty criminals. Why is that story told enough?
ICE is trying to get the story out. Their most wanted fugitives are people who've been ordered removed from the United States who failed to leave that committed serious crimes in this country. So that's why they're on the most wanted list. Again, it's another testament that sanctuary cities doesn't work. Sanctuary cities knowingly, they're sanctuary for criminals, nobody else. The ones that support sanctuary cities say, well, we're trying to protect the immigrant community. It's a bunch of crap. Because releasing a criminal alien that's going to go back and reoffend the very community in which he lives, the immigrant community, doesn't make sense. So you're not protecting the immigrant community. You put them at greater risk of crime. You put them at greater risk of ICE arrest. Because we can't arrest a bad guy in the jail. We're going to go to the neighborhood and arrest him. And we're probably going to find others that weren't even on our radar. It doesn't help immigrant communities at all. Matter of fact, look at Montgomery County in Maryland. They've arrested 9 illegal aliens for rape in the last 2 months. 7 of the victims were in the immigrant community. So tell me how that sanctuary law protected that immigrant community. And I dare any politician that thinks sanctuary cities is a smart idea, go to the immigrant community and ask them one simple question. Would you rather have ICE agents working in your county jail or in your neighborhood? They're going to say county jail. because ICE only wants access to the county jail. So these politicians say, well, we're afraid victims and witnesses of crime won't come forward. Well, unless you lock them up in a jail cell, we don't even know they exist. We want access to the jail where you already took this man's liberty away and locked him in a jail cell. So apparently you think he's either a public safety threat or a flight risk when he's committed a serious crime. When you're done with him, let's have him, because he's in a violation of federal law. There's no downside of that. None. So it's a false narrative being pushed by the left that sanctuary cities protect immigrant communities. We've proven it does not. It just results in more crime for them and more access, a greater chance of being arrested by ICE. And plus, sanctuary cities is a selling point for the cartels. I'm going to get you to Chicago or New York City for this much money, and guess what? You can get arrested by the local officials for committing crime, and they don't work with ICE. You're free to. They don't work with ICE. That's why they're rushing to sanctuary cities. That's why illegal immigrants are rushing to New York and Chicago and to California.
And they can hide, and they hide very well there.
Yeah, look, it's a sanctuary for criminals, and they know if. Look, they advertise. You got the governor of California, Newsom, going down to El Salvador, want more people to come. When you open the door like that and you entice these people, Gavin Newsom needs to understand the next woman to get raped, look in the mirror, because you have enticed more people to take that dangerous journey. So who's to blame for that woman being raped? Of course, it's the person that raped her or sexually assaulted her, but you help entice her to put herself in that position.
So they become activists. How much does ICE work with Interpol and some of the international law enforcements that we have to kind of go recover some of these people someplace in the United States and get them out of here?
We have a very good relationship with Interpol and other nations. We have attaché offices in over 40 different countries. And
that part of the story doesn't get told either, does it?
No. I mean, that's the part of the story the media is never going to cover. But we have attaché offices in 40 countries. We stop. For instance, in Panama, we have a strong office in Panama. I can't tell you how many known and suspected terrorists we stopped in Panama. They were en route to the United States, but we stopped them in Panama and removed them from Panama rather than waiting for them to get here.
Those are major success stories that never get told.
And we should always, when I was ICE director, I said, I'd rather play the away game than the home game. If we can get our hands on these people outside the country and stop them dead in their tracks and remove them, that's what we should be doing. Let's not wait till they get here.
How do we just find this Hezbollah character? That was the Hezbollah character of, Mr. Saab from New York. How do we, how much was ICE involved in that one? Maybe can't talk about it.
Well, if I do, it's kind of law enforcement sensitive. I'd have to tell you how we went about it, and I'd rather not.
No, that's okay. That's fair enough. But nonetheless,
I don't think they're listening to the show, but I just don't. Law enforcement sensitive stuff we won't talk about. We got our ways of finding people.
But nonetheless, that is part of that crosses the radar.
ICE is
that realm of responsibility.
ICE is the second largest participant in the JTTF Joint Terrorism Task Force. FBI is number one, ICE number two. And let me tell you something. After 9/11, FBI couldn't get in a lot of doors to talk to people, interrogate people. You know who got them in the door? ICE, because they're under immigration control and they can't hide from us. So we were able to get FBI into places FBI couldn't get into. So having that immigration authority is important when you talk about terrorism cases. Well,
and I'm taking you around to a lot of parts of the job that people don't really talk about enough, and I think there's some major successes there that I think I would take and throw in the face of some of your activist people in Congress that you have to go testify before, and take some of those stories. And say, hey, you had this character. How come you're not talking about and giving us, a hat tip for this one or, a blue ribbon for that one?
They don't care. They don't. I've tried.
But you need to toot your own horn.
Well, we keep tooting our own horn. And the last thing I talked about abolishing ICE, I named off all the stats I just named off 10 minutes ago. They don't care. They got a false narrative, and they're going to push it. It's about resisting this president. It's about winning back the White House. It's about seeing this president fail.
I want to see Mr. Tom Homan just kind of walk into the set while the cameras are rolling on CNN and see how that goes. Can you do that?
No, it's not going to go well because they're not going to talk to me.
Or do it with MSNBC or something. Just walk onto the set and say, let me have this little discussion with you.
I don't watch those networks, but I see some reporting come on my phone. I would love to walk in and set the record straight, but they don't. Again, they're pushing a false narrative too.
Mr. Tom Homan. Big, huge round of applause for you and the work you're doing. I like it that you're still in the fight. So thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Thanks for having me. And Denise, you stay in the fight too. I can't do it on my own. It's people like you and shows like this help educate American people. We need that. Thank you.
Thank you. More coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us on the Denise Simon Experience. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Denise Simon Experience, heard worldwide on Mojo 50 and hosted by my dear friend Scott James on WDDQ. We're here still in Washington, D.C., in the swamp, the heart of the swamp, although it's not terribly swampy today out there. The hill's pretty busy, and we don't want to go over that direction. Got a previous guest with us, a texting buddy of mine, Derek Maltz, who, he was a DEA special agent, has done some amazing things. You guys have heard some of the stories he's been kind enough to share, but he's been brought into the mix here. And thank you, Mr. Derek, for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Thank you, Denise.
Opioid crisis and vaping.
Okay, so it just goes to show you how bad the swamp is.
Take on over. I'm going to sit back, ladies and gentlemen. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's actually people in the government that are suggesting like the DEA should be focusing on some vaping cases now when we have an unprecedented level of death and destruction going on all over America because of this opioid crisis and the fentanyl specifically and synthetic opioids coming from the Chinese organized crime and the Mexican cartels. And so, yeah, there's just not enough resources to do everything. Unfortunately, vaping is pretty bad for you, and there's some chemicals. But it's the same concept, Denise. They're being made in places anywhere in the world. They're being sold on the Internet. Kids have no idea what they're buying. So it wouldn't be surprising if in another 3 years we have a vaping crisis because people are dying everywhere. So when people get educated on it's not good to ingest unknown substances into your body, we're going to continue to be talking about this. So it's kind of the same, but the DEA's focus is going to be on the Mexican cartels. That's the primary focus. But
Derek, I asked you in a text message about a month ago, if China is really a drug cartel unto themselves, because not only are they doing the opioid fentanyl component, but I would also argue we are getting synthetic what do I call them? Clone drugs for our own prescription drugs here in the United States. And we have no concept of really what's in them. We're relying on the FDA for that. And I think that they're probably a little overwhelmed too. What says DEA on this one?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to address that question. But like, first of all, I have friends that work in DEA over in Asia, and they talk to me a lot about what the relationships are with China. And it's very interesting because, like, recently there's been so much pressure put on China, especially with the tariffs and everything. It seems like the Chinese are actually doing a lot more proactive work going after, like, for example, scanning at the mail facilities. They're shutting down websites. But I've had a theory for a long time, and I'm no expert on China by any means, but it's almost like a weapon of mass destruction on the country because these chemical compounds are destroying and destabilizing our country. That's what they like. They're a communist country. Now, I've been told that it's Chinese organized crime elements, just like in our country we have organized crime elements, and that the Chinese government themselves are not intricately involved in this business. But again, the little that I know, I mean, China seems to know what's going on in their country, but there is over 1 billion people, right? So it's hard to say. I mean, honestly, like, I know they have the death penalty over there, which I'd like to see more of, but it seems to me that if you're a communist country and the U.S. is a threat, what better way and destabilize the country by killing the citizens? I mean, I know for a fact because when we worked in Afghanistan, there were many high-level Taliban drug kingpins that would openly say selling heroin to the West is a jihad. They love the idea of killing Americans at the same time making millions of dollars.
Easy.
It's
Easy
common
to do.
sense.
And it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy, very easy. People are addicted and stuff like that. But it's hard to be critical of any other country right now when we have our own issues within. You said it perfectly. We are in the swamp. I like to refer to it as the land of the make-believe. But in reality is, you can't throw stones if you live in a glass house. So it's hard to really pick on China or pick on another country for the drug crisis when we don't take care of business here.
Well, I mean, we had an awful lot of conversation last year about opioids and fentanyl, and people, what was it, 80,000 people had died because of overdoses in the year before, and now we're under this vaping thing, and then you got members of Congress that are freaking out about this, and they want to, legislate that, and so forth and so on. But I really want to go back to something that happened probably 25, 30 years ago, and that is just say no. Why are these schools not taking some ownership? Why isn't DEA? Why isn't the Department of Justice going over to the Department of Education and saying, you better put this in 20 minutes a day in every single grade going all the way up, because we got a lot to make up. So we're going to have to go into the university level too. We got to go backwards. I mean, we're out of control here, Derek.
Absolutely. The education is huge. The demand is huge. It's not just a law enforcement problem. I mean, law enforcement has done a pretty good job, in my opinion, going after cartels, going after kingpins. But as you could see, I mean, you could take down a kingpin, you could take down a cartel or a piece of a cartel, and they're going to just continue because they're making billions of dollars. The idea is if you shut down their production and you shut down the demand, then you're going to make a difference. Now, in regards to your question, I mean, my understanding is that the Office of the Drug Czar is responsible for actually educating and pushing out public service announcements, which they used to do a great job, by the way. I remember this still to this day, I have it. There was a video about a little girl who was talking to her mother about because she bought marijuana, she got killed by a bomb, right? So it's kind of showing the crime and terror, the drugs and terror nexus. And I like the actual commercial, but I haven't seen any of them in years, right? So going back to your point, we should have mandatory education of the drug crisis starting in elementary school, not high school, because sometimes it's too late.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
you got to start and go all the way up.
You
to
go
the
all the way back,
university,
and your idea about getting with the Department of Education and having a synchronized effort for the education is a great idea. I mean, honestly, like, it just seems to me like, okay, you can't expect your lead law enforcement agency in the drug situation to then have to go out and do all this stuff because they don't have enough resources. Now, they do it on their own. I know as a DEA guy, I would go out to schools and to talk to parent groups and talk to companies when I could. We did it on our own. We weren't getting paid extra. They shut down our budgets for drug education. So what they should be doing is enhancing those areas of the DEA. And I know that they have done some of that stuff. Like, I'll give you an example. In New England, going back over a year ago, they held a youth summit. Mark Wahlberg had a foundation. His brother, Jimmy Wahlberg, has a foundation, and they held a drug awareness event for these kids. There were like 8,000 kids. Actually, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, went up there and was participating in it, and it was awesome. And actually, he said during that meeting, he said, this should be the start of a national movement. But you know what the problem was? No follow-up. Like, DEA is still doing that, but like there was no strategy to do it, like no accountability. Like, what are we doing?
If we would put the energy, the media, the attention, and the resources to the entire narcotics, legal and illegal, I would say, because I mean, prescription drug, as we are doing on climate change, would we not have fixed the problem by now, Derek?
I mean, look, there's a lot more that you could do. I don't know if it would fix the problem because there's so much money to be made in multi-billion-dollar industry. But actually, there was a comment made by the former drug czar, which I really liked. He's referring to a comment on how much money has been spent on terrorism. And I have this quoted because it made me think about it. He says, we're spending much more money on terrorism as we should be, but not spending a similar amount on the source of death to many more Americans right now, which I thought was a pretty interesting statement, right? Because, like, if you look at 9/11, right? 9/11 and then the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, about 9,500, 9,800, whatever it was, people died. But just last year alone, in 2018, there was over 68,000 dead from drug overdoses. And you know what the joke is, Denise? People are actually waving the flag like that's a good thing. Okay, it's a good thing because it went down from 72,000 and change down to 68.5. But you know what nobody's saying? Synthetic opiates have gone up from 28,000 or 29,000 to over 30,000, 32,000. I can't remember exactly. But the point is there's been a significant increase in deaths from synthetic opioids, right? And that's still so much more. It's like if you total up Iraq, Afghanistan, and 9/11, that's like 14% of how many people died just last year, right? But people want to wave the white flag, and the politicians want to say how they're stopping the drug issue and everything. It's a joke. I mean, we have to, and the other thing that they're concealing from the American public is the increased use of Narcan. Thank God Narcan is available. Thank God it's saving lives, and I applaud the people that made it. But to sit there and say, you know, the fentanyl overdose deaths have gone down, let's say, in a certain state, you have to look beyond that. Well, how many Narcan prescriptions were sold? Like, my understanding of Narcan, it's like doubling and tripling as far as the sales of Narcan because so many more people need it. And that's a good thing because we're saving lives. But that's not like a sign of victory.
Well, in local law enforcement, it was never budgeted to have to buy the kind of volume of the Narcan kits that they're buying.
Great point. That's a really good point because they have limited funds to begin with. As technology is advancing in this country, the bad guys are taking advantage of the most sophisticated technology, but law enforcement is in the dark ages in many ways. So you're right. If they have to buy all these Narcan kits, and it's a priority because they want to actually, not only are they trying to save people that are overdosing, but their own cops. The cops can die from this stuff by getting close to it.
Because it's so lethal.
Right, so lethal. So remember, Denise, I said this before, I'll say it again. People have to realize that only 2 milligrams can kill an adult. And that means that 1 kilogram can kill 500,000 people. Okay, now, I'm not saying 1 kilogram is going to kill 500,000, but according to the experts, and I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor, 2 milligrams can kill an adult. And the stuff that's coming out of China is very, very pure. And I know Mexico is advancing their capabilities for production. But the bottom line is this is very, very lethal. It is a weapon of mass destruction. Let's be honest. It's all semantics, right? But if we had, like, for an example, 1 kilogram of a biological weapon sitting in Mexico right now, what would this country be doing?
Is there a big distinction between, you know, this kind of fentanyl and sarin? I mean,
no, exactly. You're exactly right. And that's why you got to keep this stuff really simple, Denise. It's common sense. It's killing people. It's destroying families. I mean, I have, like, multiple families that I talk to on a regular basis, families that have lost loved ones from opioid overdoses. And it's so sad to hear the stories because most of these kids, Denise, are actually good kids that have had injuries, that got addicted. Then after they got addicted, they had to run to the streets to buy heroin. The white heroin was very good, so they started getting more addicted. And then, of course, it leads to they're snorting something that has fentanyl, or they're taking a Mexican oxy pill. You know about, like, Phoenix, for example. Let me give you an example. In Phoenix, 4 years ago, they didn't seize any Mexican oxy, the little blue pills, right? Then the first year, when they calculated stats, they seized 20,000 pills. In 2017, they seized 38,000 pills. In 2018, they seized 380,000 pills. And this year, as of a month ago, they were over 1 million pills. So what does that tell you, Denise? That's just on the border. They're seizing these little pills. But here's the problem. Those little pills are killing kids all over the place because they don't know what they're taking. They're trying to get a hold of oxy, right? That's what they want, and this is what they buy. And unfortunately, it's made in labs in Mexico in counterfeit, like it's a counterfeit product. It's killing them.
And at what point does that become in liquid form and ends up in the vaping, in the little...
Well, no, you're exactly right, just like THC. 100%. Denise, you're exactly right, and that is a serious issue. So on one hand, I do applaud people in the country, the president himself, that they're talking about vaping. At least they're talking about it. It's early in the game, and we just got to get the word out. So that's not a bad thing. But you're right on point because they're going to do whatever they have to do to make money.
And it's easy.
And it's easy
fast.
worldwide. But Denise, not to be like an alarmist or anything like that, but just imagine if you're a terror group somewhere in the world and you want to really hurt Americans. You could put some kind of poison in these things, sell them on the internet. Nobody will realize where they're getting them from. And now people start dying. I mean, that's not unrealistic. It could happen.
It's the naivete that we all have at the citizen level, at the kid level, at the government level.
Right.
All right, let me turn in a big, huge way over to Southern Command. I would argue that Southern Command probably has a better handle on what is happening with human trafficking, narcotics, drug cartels, money laundering, and all these kinds of things in Central and in South America than really probably any other domestic agency that we have. And yet, when it comes to having a legitimate discussion on any of those things, immigration, human trafficking, narcotics, so Southern Command is never a part of the discussion. I know the DEA works with Southern Command, but why are we not getting some of that testimony? Why are we not seeing some of those reports? I mean, I have to dig for them.
No, I got it.
Them.
And I'll give you a couple of background examples. So in 2007, I was very fortunate. I was asked to come down to Southern Command and meet with a very decorated Admiral Stavridis. And during the briefing, we talked about crime and terror, and he actually impacted me for my entire life, because he gave me a slide of a fireball where Islamic terrorists and narco terrorists came together. It was his worst nightmare slide. And I've used this slide in social media and even Fox News, pushing it out to get people's attention on this particular area. The reason I bring that up is this guy was such a smart, visionary guy from Southcom. He saw this emerging in Venezuela, in South America, and this wasn't anything new to him. And he was preaching this out in the media. He was testifying to Congress. And then General Kelly, when General Kelly took over Southern Command, he was putting out some of the most influential, and it certainly convinced me, some unbelievable intelligence about what was going on in the region with not just drugs and terrorism, but human trafficking, weapons trafficking, like you said, all of the stuff you talked about, alien smuggling. But here's the thing. As you know, we in DEA and all the other agencies, they do work closely with all the commands. When I was running SOD, we had a rep from Southcom, from SOCOM, from Northcom, from not Eurocom, but we worked with them, and also AFRICOM. But here's the thing. They have people in the Pentagon that still think we're fighting the old wars. In other words, like, I love DOD, don't get me wrong. I love them. But they have to realize that this is a war right at our southern border. This is a war like we've never seen before. And so they sometimes downplay these things that are outside their scope of traditionally like what they're supposed to be doing. Well, they're supposed to be protecting America, and they do a hell of a job. So yes, I agree. They need to be heard. And honestly, a lot of stuff, though, I have to be honest, is circular reporting, right? So you get some law enforcement agency putting out a report, and then all of a sudden somebody in DOD, or reverse, it goes both ways. And so that's why you have to have a synchronization of effort. And that's why at SOD, what I used to love about SOD is that when we did Special Operations Division.
Tell the listeners.
Yeah, when we used to have these meetings, I would have my military reps. As a matter of fact, when I was at SOD, like, for example, not just Admiral McRaven, not just General Kelly, but McRaven was another one. Admiral McRaven was the SOCOM commander who helped kill bin Laden. He actually did something that no one in the government ever did for me. And I love that guy, and I'll tell you why. Besides the fact that he killed bin Laden, and he's a hero in America, he actually heard what we had to say about crime and terror, and he invited me up to Washington, to the swamp here, to actually brief all these know-it-alls that sit in the counterterrorism executive meetings that don't understand the connectivity between crime and terror. So I was shocked, because normally when people say, hey, Derek, we want you to brief some people, I'm like, yeah, because they just say that just to make you feel good. But in this case, I was getting calls 5 minutes after I left his meeting, because he already started the thing in motion. Mm-hmm. And people from Intel community and other agencies were worried, like, what was Maltz going to say about crime and terror? Because, Denise, on that note, going back to your original question about Southern Command, this is why it's critical. Right now, because the terrorists need significant funding to do their operations, and because the terrorists are tapping into counterfeiting, human smuggling, drug, everything, all the rest of it, all of the above. here's what's critical. We have to recognize that this isn't just the war against terrorists, the war against transnational criminals, the war against marijuana dealers. This is
a hybrid.
It's a hybrid, and they all are coming together, but it's all about the money. So if I'm a terrorist organization that wants to destroy this country, I need the cash to operate. And if I can make multi-billions of dollars from drug trafficking or human smuggling or counterfeiting, that's what I'm going to do. So the military has a unique perspective. Cars, right? Because the military has this perspective because they have the goal of protecting America, and they have a mission, very important mission, but all this other stuff comes into play. That's why at SOD and other Beltway operations, we do have participants from SOCOM, SOUTHCOM, NORTHCOM, and all these other, command operations. But you're bringing up a good point. And I know there's a lot of laws, but Denise, some of these laws are so old, and some of these policies, they have cobwebs on them, and nobody wants to change them because most of the people are worried about the problem of the day and not the future. So the future is integrating all elements of government to work together, synchronize efforts, and go after the threats, the biggest threats to the country. I'm going to tell you one quick story, only because it reminds me of the story. In 2010, the U.S. Attorney from New York City recognized, based on work that DEA was doing and other agency, that crime and terror was so connected that he knocked down the walls between the criminals and the terrorist investigations. So basically his attitude was, I'm going to put the best prosecutors against the biggest threats. Doesn't that make sense, Denise? So it's the same thing. If you have a hybrid group, which the most of them are, you want to put the best military, the best law enforcement, the best intel community, and synchronize and use all the tools of national power, all the authorities that all our agencies have to work together. This is a big problem because we sometimes are asking for more authorities when we already have enough authorities. We just have to use them together.
Well, and some other agency may have the authority that you're looking for.
Well, I'll give you an example. Perfect example is the Treasury Department with the Carr case, Project Cassandra, and the fact that they were able to do these really powerful OFAC designations and sanctions and the 311 action. I knew nothing about any of this stuff, but we wound up doing it together where we weren't worried about who's getting credit, who's in the lead. We were worried about protecting Americans.
Well, I was reading some interesting testimony the other day, and it had a whole bunch of, FBI names in it, and then I would say their divisions or their titles, and some of them go on forever. And it was really quite remarkable in a particular piece of testimony how many of these fellers from the FBI had all of these specialties to them, and yet DEA, for instance, as an agency, would have to necessarily call on them or intersect with CIA or intersect with Interpol or some of these other agencies. And then you start getting territorial. Yes. And then you get unterritorial. Then you have to say, well, you help me out on this. We don't have the resources. And so it's kind of like we almost have to have another kumbaya moment.
Yes.
Do we not?
Well, we definitely need to have the leadership get together and recognize, okay, what are the threats? Who has information on the threats? Who has access to the threats? Who's going to contribute to the problem set? And let's work it together. And that's exactly right what you're saying. And that's what's going on. And that's why I'm a big advocate of eliminating this lead agency nonsense, because it's not possible to do that. So I'll give you an example. In the terrorism world, domestically, the FBI has the lead, right? And they have their JTTFs all over the country. And they try to work together, and they've done some tremendous work as far as shutting down. Look what they just did in New Jersey, taking down Mr. Saab and another Hezbollah sleeper in the country.
Well, he isn't alone.
No, he's not alone.
Nobody's asking that question.
And Denise, he's not the first one arrested. That's like the third one over the last year or two. And these guys had some big plans for really devastating events, right? Thank God the JTFs did a good job. So I'm not knocking anybody in the JTS, but I'm knocking the system, because what happens is when they get a terrorist like lead, they look at that terrorist in the bubble of, is this guy a terrorist, right? Do we have any information to take him down as a terrorist? Maybe we have information he's a drug trafficker, so maybe we should include DEA or Homeland Security.
Precisely.
Or maybe he's a gun guy, so we'll give it to ATF. The problem is,
murderer.
the problem is, okay, Al Capone was a mass murderer, and we took him down with a tax charge, right?
Right.
The same concept has to go into play today. I don't care if it's a terrorist or drug trafficker. We want to take these people down, and we want to prevent them from doing bad things. So use the power of the laws of the United States and the expertise and capabilities of everyone to take them down. That means you need a unity of effort. You have task force environments. And unfortunately, we have these things on paper set up, but then the accountability is gone. They're not. There's no one being held accountable for the action.
Well, and your point is well taken. I was watching a documentary the other night about how we actually found out that we could go track down al-Zawahiri and kill him. Okay? Zawahiri, I guess. And so what does McRaven do? Well, he calls in, says, okay, we need somebody from NSA, we need somebody from FBI, we need somebody from CIA, we need somebody from, Treasury, we need and they all said, bring in your little computers, fly over here, we're going to start, running all these raids. Here's the pocket litter. You guys figure it out, and then tell us where we can find this cat. And we find them, a month later.
Yeah.
And we drill them.
Well, it's funny you say that, because one of my worst nightmares, and still to this day, I'll tell you the story. In 2014, Admiral McRaven hosted for the entire U.S. government interagency at SOCOM, and the highest level people from the government were there, right? The Attorney General, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, and others. And the idea was, okay, what are the biggest threats to the country? Let's bring everyone together and figure out how we're going to go after these people together. Well, guess what happened? One of the threats happened to be Lebanese Hezbollah, because they're a huge threat. And we couldn't get everybody to come together. But after we left the meeting, everything sounded great that day. People did their PowerPoints. Everything was looking great. We looked like we had our act together. So when we left, nothing happened. So DEA went on to do their thing, working with Treasury and this one and that one. And basically everyone else did their own thing. And to this day, it's still not synchronized. So Admiral McRaven did the right thing by pulling everyone together, because we needed a leader to do that, which he did. And it should have been the Attorney General, but it wasn't. Because here's another thing. Let me tell you another thing. This is a Derek Maltz thing. And that is, why are we putting people that have no leadership or experience or requisite skills to run global law enforcement agencies?
Touché.
So why are we not putting people that have the background, the credibility, and the knowledge to go after these threats?
Even if they don't, at least have the fire in their belly. And I don't see a lot of fire in their belly.
No, there's not a lot of fire. You know what there's a fire in? Their checking accounts and their saving accounts. That's all they're looking at. And unfortunately, the American public doesn't get the service that they need when people are worrying about how much money they're going to make. Look at the opioid crisis, for example. Right now, today, we have the Department of Justice. We have all these agencies going after Big Pharma.
Yeah, the Purdue thing.
Okay, and guess what? God bless them. I'm glad finally, but it's 20 years too late. And now people that are in legitimate pain, that are sitting there in the medical office, they can't get Oxy. They can't get Percocet, because the doctor's afraid to prescribe it.
Terrified.
Now, here's the deal. But now what's killing Americans is not those opioids. It's the fentanyl that's coming from Mexico and China. And we're still now going back to like 20. And I'm not saying they shouldn't do what they're doing, because we've had some great successes recently against doctors and pharmacists and distributors. And there's some big legal cases now all over the country. But my point is that what's the threat? Like, are we going to wait like 20 years now to then go after the Mexican cartels for the fentanyl? You know what I mean? So, yeah, we can go on all day with that.
Terror group. And, we have some unfinished work to do here, Mr. Derek, don't we?
Yeah, oh, God, yeah. And we have a lot of work. And unfortunately, we need a lot of action, because we could sit here all day long and talk about the problems. And we have some decent solutions to put things in motion to go forward. But we need commitment from leadership.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Derek Maltz, former DEA special agent, and still in the fight. So
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Denise Simon
Come
Experience.
back. Yes,
we'll
sir.
continue to come back.
There's more coming your way, ladies and gentlemen, so stay with us.
You can't handle the truth. The Denise Simon Experience. The Truth Matrix. Vetting, exposing, drilling down to the truth.
Rolling Thunder, this is Hitman. Seat over. Hitman, this is Rolling Thunder. Seat out.
The Denise Simon Experience. Exposing politics, lies, demagoguery, spin, fraud.
Grid to suppress. Mike Charlie, 4 tree 5, 9er 2-1. Grid to mark. Mike Charlie, 4-7 tree 9er, 8-9er, out.
Promoting individual situational awareness. Question, probe, notice, ask why.
Mark smoke on the deck, 2 rounds HEBT, gas TOT 5-3.
And now, the Denise Simon Experience.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for hanging with us here on the Denise Simon Experience, heard worldwide on Mojo 50. We're still up here in Washington, D.C. in the swamp, and I had to go to the other side of my state and work very diligently with the sheriff's public affairs officer because she is swamped and because the sheriff is swamped, and that is Sheriff Wayne Ivey of Brevard County, who I might add is probably in a little bit of competition with Sheriff Grady Judd. You two, I mean, it's welcome, Sheriff.
Thank you for having me. I have to tell you, Grady is a great friend of mine. He's been a great mentor to me, and he and I we're cut from the same cloth. There's no doubt about it.
There is nothing really more fun than doing a ride along, and at my old age, I decided that I was going to do one. So I did a ride along about 2 months ago now in North Pinellas County with the lieutenant. And my lieutenant happened to be from New York, so he had a whole bunch of stories to tell. I think he might be just a little on the bored side when you compare, Pinellas County with New York.
Yeah.
But listen, if someone's going to do a ride along with you, Sheriff, what are they going to see?
Well, are you doing it with me? Because I actually do ride-alongs. I sell them at an auction, believe it or not.
You sell the ride-alongs at an auction?
We do. We try and help our charitable organizations as much as we can. So we sell. It's basically an experience package where you do. You and 3 of your friends can do a ride along with me, and I go out and I back up our deputies throughout the night. We start at 6 o'clock
at night.
You have
6
dinner.
6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, we have a private dinner, and then we just go and we back up our deputies, and you get to see Brevard County's finest as they're doing. So you get it all. You get to go on a helicopter ride. You get to see the canines.
Oh, wait a minute! I didn't get the helicopter.
That's because you were in Pinellas County. You got to come to Brevard County. That's God's country over there. So, but if you just ride, if you're riding with one of our deputies, one of our local heroes in Brevard County, you're going to go from every call that you can imagine, from anything from neighbors that are not getting along because one of them's putting limbs in the other one's yard to a domestic to a drug overdose. Just depends on the day. And we've been very fortunate in Brevard County. Our crime rates dropped 30% in the last 6 years, but we still have those calls that you go on, and some of them you shake your head and go, I can't believe I just went on that, and others you shake your head and go, that just impacted me for the rest of my life. It
is really quite remarkable that the sublime to the ridiculous things that deputies have to go do. I mean,
there's no doubt.
It's you don't think that these things are going on in your county.
Right.
And it does not that they don't just go on at 6 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday either. Right. They could be going on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday.
That's right. There's no time frame where we're not going on a call. The thing that I've learned, and I've been in this business for almost 40 years, the thing that I've learned is in our field, every day of your life, you're going to get the chance to impact someone in a negative or a positive way. And sometimes when you think you're impacting them in a negative way, maybe by arresting them or something of that nature, you're actually saving their life. And so every day you have a chance to do something that's going to change somebody's life. And there's no thrill ride at any theme park that is like what we do.
No,
it's not only a rewarding job, it's a very necessary job.
Florida, does it still have the reputation for being on the short list of the highest human trafficking state in the country?
The last I knew, we were number 3 in the nation.
I thought it was 3. Why are we still 3? Why are we not 10? Why are we not 50? Why are we on there at all?
I tell you something, and I think we all have to bear a little bit of this burden, shoulder a little bit of this blame. I can remember, I'm going to go back probably 10 years ago. We would go to Intel meetings, and there was one analyst, Heidi, who would come to every meeting. And before the meeting was over, when you went around the room, she would say, "We need to talk about human trafficking." And unfortunately, every one of us, and then we're going back 10 years, every one of us in the room would roll our eyes and go, "We don't have human trafficking here." And you know what? She had wisdom beyond her years, because we did. We weren't willing to open up and take our blinders off. And so, now you fast forward to today, where Florida, as you said, ranks number 3 in the nation, and you have to start thinking about how it ties into everything, how it ties into abductions, how it ties into even the workplace where they're being forced into labor, how it ties into illegal immigration, all of these things, and it's really concerning.
I want to hit on a testy little thing because it has actually implicated a NFL football team owner, Mr. Kraft, because we had an interesting situation in a massage location in South Florida. But what is particularly fascinating, and this has gotten lost, Mr. Sheriff, and that is the girls that work there. Mm-hmm. None of them were U.S. citizens. Mm-hmm. They were all here on, I would argue, illegal visas. Mm-hmm. They were not allowed to leave this place, but that's a part of the story that is dovetailing the human trafficking thing, which I would argue in some cases went into slavery.
Right.
And that got lost because we're dealing with a very wealthy NFL football team owner.
I mean, give me a break. Let there be no doubt. Human trafficking is modern day slavery. That's what it is. And when you look at if someone is in the human trafficking industry and they're looking to make money, there's a few different ways they can make that money. One, they can make that money by doing forced labor in the agriculture industry. What I always tell people in our community is, do we have agriculture? Agriculture is one of the biggest things we have in our community, especially in the state of Florida. So check that box. There's an opportunity for human trafficking. The second way is in the hospitality industry, which is in some sense what you're talking about here. Whether it's
that's some real hospitality.
There's no doubt. Yeah, that takes hospitality to a whole new level. But there's the hospitality industry where you're talking everything from cruise lines, you're talking hotels, you're talking restaurants, you're talking nail salons, you're talking massage parlors, all of those things. So every community has that. So check that box. And then you get to the forced sex industry. And I don't care if you're in Fargo, North Dakota, or you're in Miami, that business exists. So when you look at all of those things, it doesn't, to say we don't have it, whether you're saying
shame on us.
Shame on us. That's exactly right. And that's one of the things I've always kept in the back of my mind is, I get asked to speak a lot on human trafficking. And when you're talking about it and you're looking at the overwhelming majority of the victims are women, when you're looking at how that is impacting them, how most of them are reluctant to testify, even when we're able to rescue them, because 2, they don't want to relive the horrific things they've been through, and 3, they just want to put that chapter of their life behind them and move on. So it makes it tough on that side as well.
You're on the front line in Brevard County, but you're also on the front line in the state of Florida. One of the scandals that was happening out in California was something known as the birthing hotels or birth tourism. And it was done by a couple of Chinese people that finally pled guilty. They got caught. And that was a case I think had been on at least 8 or 10 years old that finally saw the light of day in a courtroom. Sheriff, we got the same thing in Miami going on with Russians. Is that permeating beyond? I mean, do we have some of this, I would say, anchor baby birthright citizenship immigration problem coming north of in other places? Has that crossed your radar at all?
It hasn't crossed our radar there. I can tell you that as far as I'm aware, we haven't had that in Brevard. But, nothing shocks me anymore.
And that's the pathetic statement, because I feel the same way.
Just when you think, okay, I've seen it all, you realize you haven't seen it all. And especially when you look at one of the biggest crimes, in fact, one of the most lucrative crimes in the world, one of the least penalized crimes in the world. In fact, 1 in every 100 go to jail. When you look at identity theft, when you look at, and trust me when I tell you, identity theft and illegal immigration have a direct correlation. They tie right together. But for the longest time, we never worked it. You were a victim of identity theft. You just
you don't have time for
and
it.
You moved on.
Because there's not blood and guts in it.
That's right. That's exactly right. But nothing shocks me anymore. Every time somebody tells me about a new crime or an incident happened, I start to say, "Wow, I can't believe that," and I go, "Yeah, I really can."
The hardest thing it is for we people, we little civilians out here, and particularly radio hosts, we don't get to see the world through the eyes of, say, law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So that's why I did the ride-along. I subscribe to FBI's emails, and I subscribe to Customs and Border Patrol emails. And I can't read them all because the volume of them coming to me every day is just huge.
Exactly.
Sheriff, those are major stories that aren't getting told.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, you guys have some remarkable stories to be told, but your budgets aren't staying in line with the work that you have to do, is it?
Right. Well, here's one of the things that we do in our community. We figured out very quickly that to truly lower our crime rate, we had to engage our citizens and to get them to help. They're the first line of defense. And so we engaged our community. We do so much through social media, which really, when you look at the platform of social media, it's one of the least expensive ways to reach. Yeah.
And it's fast.
And it's fast. So let's just take, we have 3 Facebook pages. One of them is our main page, and that page
is the Giddy Up Challenge on any of them?
No, we don't do the Giddy. We haven't done the Giddy
Up
Challenge. No, I can't get into it.
Sheriff Lamb to do it at least.
Yeah, but Sheriff Lamb's not near as good looking as I am.
Oh, is that it?
So he's a great friend of mine, by the way. So, but when you look at our pages, just one page, we have 125,000 people following us on. Another page, we have 30,000 people following us on. When you push a button, we on average throughout the week we reach anywhere from 500,000 to 600,000 people. There's no other tool like that. So
when you've got live PD that has watch parties, that tells you that we want to help you.
That's exactly right. Our community, I say this everywhere I go. I have the honor of working in Brevard County where our citizens love us, they trust us, and they protect us just as much as we love, trust, and protect them. And let me tell you, our crime rates dropped 30% because we've engaged our community. We capture bad people off of our social media. People, we're a little bit innovative in how we do
stuff
it.
On social media, don't they?
Oh, they do. It's crazy. But, what we have done is we've created a partnership with our citizens. And, we have an agency of 1,500 people. But we have 600,000 crime fighters in Brevard County because they're all citizens. Partnered with us. And so, it's really been a good tool for us to be able to work with.
Okay, so let me take the other side of that. Just and I want to see how you argue with me on this one, because I need you to argue with me on this one, and that is, if in fact law enforcement with their budgets are all doing the right things and we have these success stories, then instead of giving Brevard County, let's say, $20 million a year, because you guys are doing such a great job, you don't need all that money. So why aren't those numbers going down?
Well,
and it isn't just Brevard. I mean, but it's kind of like security in the United States, public safety. We're going the wrong direction, Sheriff.
Well, here's what I would say.
Getting more expensive.
Yeah, and I would argue that with you. And here's why, Denise. Right now, the state of Florida is at I believe it's a 44-year crime low. Now's not the time to go soft on crime. Now is the time we've got our boot firmly planted on the throat of crime. We need to choke it out. We need to look at things from the aspect of we've got bad people locked up. There's a reason our crime rate's going down. It's because bad people are behind bars and they can't victimize. The moment we go soft on crime, every year you see the legislature say, oh, maybe they don't need to do the 85%. Well, how's that fair to the victim? That's there. The other thing that you have to look at in the state of Florida is unique in this situation. We have something that a lot of other states don't. We have an increasing population. People want to move to Florida. So when you look at
go to the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. Let them all go to your side.
When you look at your ratio of deputies to citizens, you want to make sure you have the right amount. You take the comprehensive plan in my county alone. I'm 50 deputies short by the comprehensive plan. Now, I've been in this business long enough to know that I've got the right amount of deputies that I need, especially in my last budget. They gave me 10 more positions. But when I look at the growth of of like an area like Vieira, where I'm at, where they're projecting 50,000 new homes in the next 5 years. I've got to be able to compete with that. I've got to be able to understand that government's one and only responsibility is to protect its citizens. So you've got to have it. Now, then you staple on some other things. In my last budget that I just got approved last night. In fact, I was late getting up here because I had to stay for our budget meeting.
Skippies.
So here's the reality. I had to have $400,000 worth of tasers. All of my tasers were antiquated. They were all, I couldn't get parts for them anymore. So somebody said, well, why do you need tasers? Well, that taser's not only to protect that deputy, that taser protects our citizens as well. So we've got to have those tools to be able to do a job. And so you're going to see where you have to start looking at how do we save the taxpayers' money is doing like we've done. We have been innovative. We went to the county commission or to the county manager and said, you're paying $275,000 to have a contractor mow all the government facilities. I have a chain gang that can come mow all those facilities. You buy the equipment. It's a one-time cost, and now we'll mow everything for you. So we did it. And we saved the county $275,000. You look for ways to save and understand that there are some. And it comes down to this for me. I manage my budget at the agency through my wants and my needs. And that's the way I manage my budget at my home, or I should say my wife does because she runs our money at the house, but this is our plan. It's our wants and our needs. And here's what it boils down to. The analogy I always use is I want a Rolex, but I need a watch. And if you go with that, you're getting what you need to protect the citizens, because that is our number one responsibility. But you're not getting the other stuff. And when you have an opportunity to get those things like increase your fleet or just quite frankly make your fleet whole, you do those things. But you stick with those basic needs. Right now, one of those basic needs across the board is to make sure we're competitive in our salaries of our law enforcement officers.
I know you sheriffs are pretty tight. I've commingled with a lot of you sheriffs up here in Washington, D.C. quite a bit, and it's fun to watch you guys. And, I know that there's an organization. I know that you're very dedicated to each other and certainly to the work that you do. But let me ask you this question. Would you ever want to swap with another sheriff for 3 days? In other words, let's say, you have a sheriff of Oregon, come down to Brevard and you go up there for 3 days and just to see, because you may swap stuff, but to see it in person, it's very different. Have you ever? It's kind of like the wife challenge. I'm not going that, but
I definitely don't want to do that. And be clear in that. I would say, you have to always have an open mind to learn. And I think equally along with that is you have to have an open mind to see how everybody else sees things. And so, if you took somebody from me, like I'm in a very Republican demographic of the state, and then you took me to another area, so that I say it, I'm a big believer. I'm a huge fan of George Patton.
Me too.
And so Patton,
he's my password on a couple of things, ladies and gentlemen.
So Patton used to say, if everybody's sitting at the table thinking alike, someone's not thinking. And so, you want that outside the box thinking. You want to look at it from a different angle. Doesn't mean I'll always agree with you, but I at least want the opportunity to say, I like that idea. And so, there's probably some worth to it. Not that it would ever happen, but,
Well, I have a buddy. I haven't spoken to him in a long time, a sheriff of Siskiyou County way up there in Northern California. Just a remarkable guy. But I think he's got no budget. Yeah. His entire county is illegal. Yeah. The logging business went to hell. There isn't any anymore. He's constantly being raided by the feds who come in and take over and don't tell him anything. And wouldn't it be fun if we got him out of there for 3 days into, say, Brevard County and said, let's.
Yeah. Well,
you see what I'm saying?
It'd be great for him to come see what we have, to see how much our citizens love us and how much they support us.
And you go there, or somebody else goes somewhere.
I got to be honest with you. If we're making this switch, and I want to be clear, it's only for a few days, but I want to go to New York because they need some law enforcement leadership in New York when they're letting their officers.
Well, that's police. That's not the sheriff's department.
Agreed,
right?
But when they're letting their officers be disrespected like they are, it's time to send somebody in there that's going to stand up for their team. So I want to go there, but now I'd like to see this other place too. So.
But how does law enforcement deal with that?
With the disrespect that you're seeing?
Yes, because you're not getting it.
No, because, and here's why.
Sheriff Lope's not getting it in Siskiyou County.
And it really boils down to this. You have to, Denise, I'm managed by standing around. And when I tell people that first time, they always smile. They always go, you manage by standing around. So I manage by standing around. I stand behind my people when they need a kick in the butt. I stand beside them in the trenches when they're working. I stand in front of them if somebody's taking a shot at them. And other than that, I stand back and watch them do amazing stuff. And the problem is they don't have anybody standing in front of them. They don't have the people saying, no, you're not going to treat our law enforcement officers that way. They're out there every day putting their lives on the line. And people say, well, it's just water. Well, says who? It could be anything. It could be just water. It could be some chemical.
Anthrax next week.
Exactly. So we have to make sure. And I think the other part of that is, as a nation, we got to get back to allowing parents to be parents, allowing them to hold their kids accountable. That's my big. Get off my soapbox.
But I mean, if you don't allow parents to be parents, then you can't allow the teachers to be teachers. So you got it on both fronts.
Yep, that's exactly right. When I went to school, Denise.
Resource officers.
When I went to school, if you came home with a bad note, it wasn't the teachers picking on me. It was, you messed up. You better not embarrass this family again. Mom kicked your butt, and then dad kicked your butt for making your mom kick your butt. And we all were happy for it, And so my kids grew up in that same mentality. My kids grew up that if you disrespected your teacher, you were getting your butt whipped. And
there was
no
a
problem
time,
about
too,
it.
that, teachers were authority.
That's
and
right.
teachers knew more than anybody because they were teachers.
There's a great meme that goes around that it shows the parents and the teacher in 1969 stand on the same side of the desk. They're pointing at the child saying, can you explain these grades? Now, today's time, the parents and the child are standing on the same side of the desk pointing at the teacher saying, can you explain this? And we've lost. The moment we went to that, we've lost. We got to get back to teaching our children to respect their teachers. The biggest part of it is parents have got to remember it's not your job to be best friends with your kid. It's your job to be best friends with your child's teacher. That's who you should be best friends with.
We got about 3 minutes left, Mr. Sheriff Ivey. So let me ask you this question. And I've asked my own sheriff, but he's pretty busy and can't. So I've asked the lieutenant and a couple other people. So I'm waiting on that phone call. But I'll ask you because you're here in front of me, sucker. But let's talk about how broken the juvenile justice system is.
Throw the baby out with the bath and start over.
Nobody wants to talk about it. And please go. I think all of you sheriffs are going over to the Capitol or to the White House tomorrow.
Yep.
If somebody doesn't hold up those little cards and just say our juvenile justice system is broken, you guys all walk in.
Let's combine two since we're limited on time. There's two systems in our country that are broken: our juvenile justice system and our mental health system. And here's what it comes down to: one, parents got to be the chief law enforcement officer in their child's life. Two, we've got to, these kids that are little snots that are just going to keep breaking the law.
I use that word a lot,
we got to put them in a place where they can't break the law anymore. If we can save them and get them back on their feet, let's get them back. But if we can't, then we need to just deal with them and move on. All right. The mental health side of things, the moment that states and government decided that quality of care was not as important as cost of care, we failed. Because when you go back and you look at when some of these problems started, I promise you'll see it coincide with when states started doing away with their state mental hospitals and privatizing mental health care. That's when it started. So those systems are broken. Throw them out. We're pretty fortunate. Governor DeSantis and our First Lady have really taken a strong emphasis and a strong interest in juvenile crime.
All you have to do is look at the Cruz case at Parkland.
Yep.
That's all you have to do.
I can tell you our First Lady and Governor Casey DeSantis is all about stopping juvenile crime, making sure we're getting those that need to help, and making sure that those need to go to jail.
The first place they start going into is narcotics.
That's it.
And then you start inviting all the, illegals, and then they start getting into these other gang kind of things. And it manifests and festers to the point where, we got to read about, the case that Judge.
And then we put them on, I use an analogy out of Animal House. We put them on probation. And then when they mess up again, we put them on double secret probation. And you remember that from Animal House? And then we put them on community control, and then they cut their ankle monitor off. And now we do something different. And you know what? Sometimes you've just got to rip it off like a Band-Aid and deal with it. Make sure they get a good snout full of what punishment looks like and move on.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big, huge embrace, hat tip and handshake to Sheriff Wayne Ivey, Brevard County. It's really nice to be able to have a face-to-face, but get some real honesty and perspective and context. Just Godspeed to all the stuff that you're doing.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. You're helping us get the word out. You're helping us.
Happen to run into my sheriff, would you tell him that he owes me a phone call?
I will do it. I'll see him. I see him all the time. So
but there's more coming your way, ladies and gentlemen. Stay with us on the Denise Simon Experience. And thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for staying with us here on the Denise Simon Experience. Well, we've pretty well covered the immigration topic. Having spent several days in Washington, D.C., talking with major experts, I think we have certainly driven a lot of points home. So we're going to change gears. And I have the distinct pleasure of having Karen Staughan with us, who is a spokesperson for men's rights. And we've had this kind of topic before. We seem to have somewhat of a manufactured kind of thing, that women are now a protected class and they take precedence over all men to the demise of the stature of men. And Karen is a contributor for avoiceformen.com. She's an advocate for them. And I've been asking a lot of men here recently, what do you guys think now that you're second-class citizens and you've been told to go sit in the corner and behave? So welcome, Karen. Thanks for coming with us on the Denise Simon Experience.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Tell us what goes on at the website, avoiceformen.com.
Well, I'm not too involved with them anymore. I haven't contributed anything in a while. I've been sort of busy doing my own thing. But basically, it's just raising awareness of issues that face men and boys, not just in the United States or in North America or in the West, but also in places where you wouldn't necessarily think that men have systemic problems to do with discrimination, places like India and South Korea and the Philippines and Iran. So, I mean, we're sort of like the website is sort of a catch-all for a whole bunch of men's issues that seem to actually be quite universal in many ways globally. So, yeah, it's kind of just a website that raises awareness for those. So.
Well, if we go back all the way to, I think Hillary Clinton and several others when they're talking about breaking through this glass ceiling and women, should take a lot more of the attention and, with that, there was a lot of demonization. We have the Women's March and so forth and so on. Karen, are you of the notion that this thing, the attack on men, boys too, I might add, was almost launched by, I would say the United States through, diplomatic wings and embassies and whatnot, that it kind of took foothold in some weird places across the globe?
Well, it really, sort of the seat of the crazy is in the U.S. You kind of had this situation in the late 60s, early 70s, the birth of women's studies, that occurred in the United States. And you essentially had, university presidents and administrators. They could have just plucked certain women out of psych wards across the nation, handed them a PhD and said, do something with it. Just even looking at the iconic T-shirt for the Hillary campaign, "The Future is Female," that was actually inspired by a manifesto written by Sally Miller Gerhardt in the 1980s. I forget exactly what year. I think it was 1989. Called "The Future, If There Is One, is if there is one, is female," and she actually recommended that males be reduced to about 10% of the total global population. So, I mean, she was actually I mean, thank goodness she didn't go the way of Valerie Solanas, who was another feminist icon, who advocated the mass extermination of men, like the systemic genocide of males. She was more along the lines of sex-selective abortion and reproductive technologies that would allow you to choose the sex of your child. And she was like, feminist light, I guess. There wouldn't be any actual killing going on. There would just be, a program to reduce the birth rate in terms of males, or the birth ratio of males. So, I mean, you're looking at, I'm looking at these T-shirts, and I know the context behind that slogan, "The future is female," and most people don't. And I'm thinking, this is getting pretty crazy. She was a pioneer of women's studies. Mary Daly, who taught at Boston College, she essentially agreed with the idea that there would have to be an evolutionary process that would reduce the population of males to around 10% of the population in order to save the planet. These are some crazy, crazy women who have been teaching in academia in the United States for quite some time and indoctrinating students. And you have to realize as well that these are activist disciplines. So activism is actually a component of the curriculum. And so you're sort of looking at, you're not just there to learn a topic, you're there to learn a topic and also learn how to agitate and how to, I guess, proselytize that worldview or that ideology, among. So it's no wonder that now, 40, 50 years later, we're seeing, the media being swamped by this ideology, politics, social work,
legislation,
education, pedagogy, legislation. The Model Penal Code is one. They've just gone through a massive campaign to change sexual assault law at the American Law Institute, to change the Model Penal Code, which is sort of the advice that the American Law Institute, which is a very prestigious organization, they want. There's a cadre of people within that organization who want to instantiate certain reforms to sexual assault law that would essentially criminalize pretty much everybody in the country who has ever had sex. So, I mean, you're looking at this, and the American Law Institute has stuck to their guns and said, no, we're not going to do that. But it's about a third of the members, the council members of that institute that are pushing for this. So, I mean, like, we're kind of, once you actually look into these institutions, you see this encroachment of this particular ideology that really has nothing good to say about men. So,
Karen, how do we even get into when we get into higher education, academia, where we have to go do gender studies now? I mean, how old is the population, and why here we are in 2019, we're teaching these classes at the university level?
Well, it's not just at the university level. There's a lot of things being taught in, in high school and middle school and primary school. So here in Canada, we have sort of a rainbow. It's called the Rainbow Unicorn lesson set, and it's very pro LGBTQ2S. IIPP. I can't remember all of the letters.
I remember that now. I remember that from a couple of years.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you're sort of looking at, because my son came home from, I think it was grade 8 or something like that, second day, and he said, Mom, there was this kid in my school, and I know he's a boy, but he was dressed as a girl yesterday, and I thought he was just dressing as a girl, for a gag on the first day of school, but then he came to school dressed as a girl again today. So, and I'm like, well, I'm guessing he thinks he's a girl, and whether or not that's something that you need to believe, just be nice to him. You know, like, there's no need to be cruel. There's no need to be mean. Just be polite. Just be nice. Just be kind. That I think that's really all that is needed in society, is to just be kind to people. You know, like with this trans student in grade 8, chances are once he comes out the other side of puberty, he's going to desist in his gender dysphoria, and he's going to just become a gay man. You know, that's 60 to 90% of children who identify as trans come out the other side of puberty, just saying, okay, I'm fine with my gender identity. I'm just attracted to the opposite sex, and puberty, being young was confusing, and going through puberty was confusing, but now I'm okay. So, you know, there's a whole bunch of things that I think, you know, there's no need, in my opinion, to bring in a curriculum saying girls can be boys and boys can be girls. It's a mixed up world, you know, Lola. There's no need to actually bring that into primary and middle schools. I think that's actually a big mistake. So,
has there been a study of consequence to this? You know, now that we've been at this for, you know, a couple of decades, perhaps, on what the psyche is of both, you know, adolescents, being whatever their gender is, or if they decide to change their gender by the hour. Has there been some kind of a
longitudinal study?
Well, yeah, where there's a report that says, you know, this is not good for this. This is beneficial for that. I mean, I think from a identity standpoint, from a career standpoint, from an educational standpoint, from a healthcare, I mean, there's lots of implications in all this, right, Karen?
Well, there are, and you know, most of the studies are short-term studies because this is a relatively recent phenomenon. I mean, if you actually look at the statistics, the number of youth presenting as trans in a city like Vancouver, in British Columbia, that has increased tenfold over the last since 2007. So we literally have guidance coming down from on high to family doctors in Canada, you know, on how to deal with trans youth, because there's just not enough gender specialists. But I mean, 90% of the information that we have, it's not been laboratory studies. It's not been sort of a study in an experimental study or a study that they're all observational studies. They're all short term because this is such a new phenomenon that has been studied. We can't extrapolate where these people are going to be in 20 or 30 or 40 years. We do know that the suicide rate in people who transition is not much reduced from the suicide rate in people who insist they're trans and do not transition. So we know it's not a cure-all for their problems. We know that transgenderism or gender dysphoria is usually comorbid with a whole bunch of other mental problems like depression and anxiety and, you know, clinically diagnosable depression and anxiety. And we also, you know, we do know now, because puberty blockers they've been around for a while, and they were developed to deal with something called precocious puberty, which is, you know, when you have a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old who starts to go through puberty, you want to put the brakes on that, of course, because they don't have the judgment involved, you know, to be able to make sexual decisions that may be life-altering, like, you know, pregnancy and things like that. So what you have is a situation where now we're dealing with longitudinal studies of people who have been on puberty blockers long term during their childhood that the prognosis isn't great. Sometimes they have permanently juvenile genitals that they just never actually go through the entire, once you take them off, they never go through the actual entire physiological process of puberty. And so I'm like, and then they have heart problems and problems with deep vein thrombosis and stroke and all kinds of other things. These are strong, powerful hormones, right? So we're looking at a situation where we've been experimenting kind of with off-label use on children in a variety of ways, and then doing observational studies to kind of find out what the fallout is, 15, 20 years later, and discovering to our chagrin that maybe we shouldn't have embarked on that entire area of medical treatment in the first place. So, this really, like most of what we're doing to children would not be to children, to trans youth, the guidelines and everything. Don't be afraid to prescribe puberty blockers. Don't even be afraid to potentially prescribe cross-sex hormone therapy at age 13 is what the guidance said. Don't necessarily be afraid to do that. They tell family doctors who have no background in this. What we're essentially doing experiments on people as clinical practice, and that you would not be able to actually get authorization from a hospital or a university to conduct experiments where you were going to say, okay, let's see what happens here. And another thing that I think that most people don't realize is that the term gender and the entire transgender, ideology or way of thinking, that was coined by a doctor in the 1970s named Dr. John Money, who is, in my opinion, responsible for 2 suicides and for a set of parents losing both of their sons. Mm-hmm. Because he thought that, this 1.5-year-old boy who lost his penis in a freak circumcision accident, let's just change his gender and give him hormones and therapy and he'll be able to grow up and live as a girl and be perfectly happy. No, he wasn't. So.
Where's the real medical community? Where's the Center for Disease Control or the American Medical Association or any of the board certification types? I don't see any of them really kind of weighing in on this entire topic. Do you, or have I just missed the memo?
Yeah, no, they're not. They're terrified. The trans activist community.
Yes.
And here's the thing, right? I have friends who are trans people. At least 2 people that I'm hugging friends with, who are trans, and they both think that this is absolutely, you have people of an age, they're not allowed to take up smoking, they're not allowed to drink, they're not allowed to drive a car, they're not allowed to give their lives for their country, they're not allowed to make their own nutritional choices. They're not allowed to decide what time to be home at night, but they are allowed to make these radical life-altering decisions that, essentially, if you allowed every single one of them to go through puberty, probably only 10% of them would persist in their feelings on the other side of that, right? So if you just allow them to go through the natural process, only about 10% of them will continue with those feelings and really want to transition. And at that point, they're adults and it's their choice. They're old enough to choose. You may not agree with it. You may think it's crazy, but they're adults. But what we have now is we have a medical establishment that's absolutely terrified to even talk about desistance, to even talk about that certain forms of this rapid onset gender dysphoria, which is it's a phenomenon that's been recorded in teenage girls who showed no signs through their childhood had any kind of gender dysphoria. But all of a sudden in their teens, they join a gay-straight alliance, or they stumble across videos that somebody put up on YouTube of their transition, and all of a sudden they're mostly on the autism spectrum and have a bunch of other comorbid problems like depression or anxiety or obsessive compulsive disorder, and they decide all of a sudden this is the solution to all of my problems because I've never been able to fit in with the other girls, so really I must be a boy. And that has all the hallmarks of the social contagion, not a genuine, essentially something that, persists throughout the entire childhood. It's a social contagion. In one UK school, there are 17 girls who claim that they are male. All of them, the other 16 were instigated by one. She was in grade 12 and the rest were in grade 10, and she befriended them and convinced them all and they're all on the autism spectrum and they all have all these other problems. And now they want to transition. They want to go on hormone therapy. They want to book their double mastectomy. They want to, look into bottom surgery and all of this other stuff. And it's like, I've talked to girls who went through this, and they say, and then I turned 21 and I woke up, and I was really glad I only took testosterone for a year. I'm really glad my parents resisted, because if they hadn't, I wouldn't be able to pass as my birth sex now. So, it's just gone haywire. It's just gone crazy.
And this is going to be a really strange question, but, there was a big, huge movement for companies, cosmetic companies, pharmaceutical companies to stop doing testing on animals. But we're doing this on humans, are we not? Is that a bad comparison?
No, this is like a huge experiment that would not pass an ethics review board examination. So you wouldn't be able to do it in a hospital under laboratory conditions. You can only do it out in the general population. So, it's extremely, extremely worrying for me that this is, and that you literally have a trans community that has so much clout that they were able to, they came very close to suppressing the foundational paper on rapid onset gender dysphoria, this phenomenon among girls, right? A researcher wrote a paper, had it published. The trans activist community managed to convince the peer-reviewed journal to consider unpublishing it based on their outrage. This was bigotry, according to them. And so, things are just absolutely getting crazy, and I don't think most people are paying a whole lot of attention. People, they look at it and they're worried about bathrooms and stuff like that. And I'm not so much worried about bathrooms. I'm worried about what we're doing to kids. Kids, half the time, when my kids were small, they identified as a dog or a cat for a day. That doesn't mean I fed them kibble for the rest of their lives, and taught them how to sit and shake paws and speak and stuff. Well, I did teach them how to speak, but English, not dog language.
Words,
right?
Right.
So you're looking at kids want. I've decided I'm going to be an astronaut today, or Spider-Man, or a fire truck, right? But then if they make the mistake of saying around the wrong person, I've decided I'm going to be a girl today. Then that person in a position of trust and authority, whether it's a counselor or a teacher or a therapist or a ideologically possessed progressive parent, is going to say, well, you are a girl. That's the reason why, and I just, I was a tomboy growing up, and if I had somebody saying that to me, I don't know what I would have answered. Mm-hmm. Right. I grew up to be a cisgender woman who was happily married for 15 years, had 3 kids. I'm in a relationship with a man now, and if somebody had come up to me at age 6 and said, "What if you actually are a boy?" Would I have kissed that all goodbye?
Where are we with teachers? Are some of these teachers in the public school systems, either in Canada or that you've seen in the United States, are they kind of freaking out, and because they don't know whether to go say the he or the she or the they or the it or the whatever? I mean, because now you kind of insult whomever because you are referring to a pronoun as a gender. I mean, I would think that educators are, in many cases, are somewhat terrified.
Well, I do have several educators in my family, in my extended family, and they're all retired, and they're all glad that they're not still
no
working.
joke.
They just absolutely would not. They don't want anything to do with this. As far as educators now, I would suspect that there's a large number of educators who have resisted the training. Because at least in Canada, there is sort of this intersectional training. So you're looking at white privilege, male privilege, cis privilege, straight privilege, all of these different kinds of privilege, and sort of the gender pronouns and all of this other stuff, right? That's all part of their pedagogical training in terms of when they attend school. And so I think that you probably have a number of teachers who essentially they go to their professional development, they learn about the rainbow unicorn, they refrain from rolling their eyes, they keep their mouths shut, they sit quietly, and they despair for humanity. I'm sure there are plenty of those, but they don't talk. They don't speak out about it because when you do, you get dogpiled. You're risking your job, right? So,
well, this is I'm waiting.
For me, I don't have a job to risk. So there you go.
I'm just a radio person, so I agree with you on that one. I'm waiting for some studies because I think that there's going to be some consequences here that need to be proven with evidence, whether at the clinical level or at the psychology level or psychiatric level, because I think it's time. I think we've been through a lot of these experimental things. We've looked at numbers. I don't know that we need more numbers than we already have. Karen, it's been a pleasure having this conversation with you.
I'm just going to say I'm waiting for the lawsuits.
Oh, well, yeah, that's a good one.
Of the adult children who say to their parents, "How could you have let me do that?"
Right.
At age 12.
I think there's been some of them that have actually happened here in the United States where maybe a son was suing his parents because he was born a son instead of a daughter. But, yeah. Karen, thank you for your attention to this fascinating conversation. We're dealing with a small percentage of the population. However, it's got social consequences, educational consequences, healthcare consequences, legislative consequences, and I mean we can go on and on and on. But thanks for your attention to this and for your time here on the Denise Simon Experience. May tap you on the shoulder again here at some point to see what the update status is. But ladies and gentlemen, big, huge round of applause for Karen Strahan. Thank you so much, and thanks for being with us on the Denise Simon Experience, heard worldwide on Mojo 50. We'll see you again very soon.